The royal fairy tale didn't crack, it shattered. And what Tom Bower and Lady Colin Campbell just dragged into the open about Archie and Lilibet detonates the most dangerous question the Sussexes have ever faced. Were the public ever told the truth about their children at all? This is where the mask slips. Not gently, not politely, violently, because this isn't random internet chatter or anonymous trolls. This is Britain's most relentless royal investigator and one of the monarchy's most feared commentators standing in front of cameras and saying, none of this adds up. And once you hear what they're pointing at, the missing logs, the altered paperwork, the vanished witnesses, it becomes impossible to unsee.
Absolutely. What we're really now seeing is that both of them, having posed as the victim for so long, are really the aggressors.
Harry and Meghan Markle's surrogacy scam has entered the mainstream media domain. Now, this story may have been somewhat overshadowed this week by the duplicitous duo's disgusting disaster tourism.
They have created the stories and the speculation and the questioning about the origin of both children. I wasn't born yesterday, and I know that 2 and 2 make 4. They don't make 22.
I think the palace and the machinery of the monarchy needs to take Harry and Meghan more seriously and make sure that Harry and Meghan's antics don't impact the future of the crown.
No, I choose people who don't want to be written about on the whole, whose lives are shrouded in mystery, and they want to hide their secrets, and I just love digging away to find out what they don't want us to know.
All Harry and Meghan need to do is prove to us that she popped those babies out. And that's all they need to do. And if they don't, it is unfair on the children. It's also unfair on the royal family.
In this case, about whether you think the birth was real, whether you think there was a surrogate, whether you think Meghan was wearing a moon bump, the fact is Harry and Meghan lied. Buckingham Palace lied on their behalf. There was a complete cover-up over the birth of Prince Archie.
He's not very intelligent and undoubtedly remains damaged by the early death of his mother, Diana. And he very foolishly blames the media for her, in his words, which is complete nonsense. But I think he loved the adulation. He loved it when he was being praised, especially when he was a soldier. But then he became criticized, firstly because he became drunk in public.
But if she hasn't had the children herself, or Harry hadn't been involved, then they can't be in the royal line. They have to have royal blood, those little ones. Without that, there's no chance of them becoming a member of the royal.
The moment Lady Colin Campbell and Tom Bower went there, the Sussex narrative started bleeding out in public. Not whispering, bleeding. They weren't talking about vibes or feelings. They were talking about documents, timelines, hospital procedures, hard details that should exist for any birth, let alone a royal one. Changed birth certificates, staff who swear they were never there, security logs with gaps so big you could drive a convoy through them. And suddenly, the story Harry and Meghan have guarded more fiercely than their Netflix contracts was no longer untouchable. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was structural failure. Because royal births don't happen in shadows. They never have. There is a system, a rigid, centuries-old protocol designed to remove doubt, approved doctors, named physicians, security coordination, media briefings, and that famous moment on the hospital steps, proof of life, proof of continuity. And yet with Archie, none of it happened. Instead, there was silence, then a vague statement, then confusion, then contradictions. And the deeper you dig, the stranger it gets. Lady Colin Campbell says the doubt wasn't accidental. She says it was engineered, knowing exactly what it would do, knowing exactly how destabilizing unanswered questions about royal legitimacy can be. And once that idea lands, everything that followed suddenly feels deliberate.
That bump had more air in it than the fantasies that Meghan and Harry go around divesting themselves of in their 16 bathrooms.
This is the moment the Sussex fairy tale started cracking. Not because of tabloids, but because the one topic Harry and Meghan protect more aggressively than money was finally touched. The births. The one thing they've always said was off limits. Private, sacred, untouchable. And yet, if everything was clean, why does every single detail scream control instead of care? Why block confirmation? Why refuse names? Why deny access to doctors that even the Queen herself offered? Tom Bauer says that's where the alarm bells became deafening, because privacy doesn't erase paperwork, and it doesn't delete hospital records, and it doesn't explain why no one, not security, not staff, not administrators, can place Meghan Markle at Portland Hospital when Archie was supposedly born. That absence isn't subtle, it's catastrophic.
Tom, do you think Harry and Meghan are fast learning what they signed away when they took this Netflix big moolah? And I would say they signed away their credibility and their dignity.
Well, that's our view, but it's not theirs. They need the money, and they need it now more than ever because they've got no other source of income. So I think they're just stuck with the devil now. They're tied to Netflix, they're tied to their book, and all the criticism they're going to take means nothing because that's the only way they can earn their money.
What made this explode was the framing. Lady C and Tom Bauer didn't present this as theory. They presented it as fact-backed contradiction, hospital logs that don't align, birth records that change quietly days later, timelines that medically don't make sense. And then comes the detail that jolted even hardened royal watchers. The palace announcing Meghan was in labor hours after Archie was already said to be born. Under normal royal rules, that simply cannot happen. Then, 11 days later, the birth certificate changes. Meghan's given names disappear. Prince suddenly appears before Harry's name. Palace officials step back and say the edit wasn't theirs. So whose decision was it? And why erase Rachel Meghan unless something about that original record didn't fit the story anymore? Lady Colin Campbell says authenticity doesn't behave like that. Truth doesn't need revision.
She has quite deliberately caused doubt, and she has created mischief, knowing that it would damage the royal family.
Royal births are meant to shut people up, not leave them with more questions. And yet, from the very beginning, Harry and Meghan's obsession with privacy felt less like protection and more like insulation. Because when Lady Colin Campbell looked into Portland Hospital, she says no one could confirm Meghan was ever there. No midwives, no front desk staff, no security trail, nothing. Compare that to the births of Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, each moment tracked minute by minute by press and palace alike. And then there's the labor timeline. The palace statement saying Meghan was in labor long after the baby should already have been born. Lady C says that isn't confusion, it's contradiction. And contradictions don't disappear, they multiply. Fast forward to 2021. Lilibet Diana, Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital. And once again, the paperwork raises eyebrows. A state code that doesn't match California. A code associated with Colorado. Was it a typo, or was the document filed somewhere it shouldn't have been? The Sussex camp won't answer. Buckingham Palace won't touch it. Silence everywhere. Tom Bauer says that silence is the loudest thing of all, because when he went looking, not speculating, not guessing, he claims he spoke to hospital staff and reviewed movement logs himself. And his conclusion, delivered live on television, landed like a hammer. Meghan Markle was not at the hospital on the day Archie was supposedly born. In medicine, he says, you don't deliver a baby invisibly. And once that claim is made, the implications become nuclear, because Archie and Lilibet aren't just celebrity children. They are recognized members of the royal family. And under UK constitutional rules, if surrogacy was involved, it must be declared for succession rights to apply. Hide that, and you don't just create gossip, you create a constitutional mess. And that, insiders say, explains the sudden legal threats, the aggressive pushback, the frantic attempts to shut this conversation down before it goes any further. Because if this collapses, everything collapses. The brand, the documentaries, the carefully staged image of authenticity. Lady Colin Campbell says the solution is simple. Release the proof, name the doctors, open the records, and yet they don't. Which leaves one brutal question hanging in the air: why protect secrecy if the truth would end the storm instantly? The silence didn't calm the storm, it fed it. Because once Tom Bauer and Lady Colin Campbell dropped their claims into the public arena, the reaction from the Sussex camp wasn't clarity, it was aggression, legal threats, warnings, the unmistakable posture of people trying to scare the conversation back into darkness. And that reaction told its own story. If the claims were ridiculous, they could have been laughed away. One document, one confirmation, one named doctor, one clean timeline. That's all it would have taken. Instead, the lawyers moved first. Within hours, sources whispered that defamation suits were being prepared, not filed, not argued, threatened. A tactic meant to chill, not resolve. Lady Colin Campbell called it exactly what it looked like: panic masquerading as confidence. Because panic makes sense when the stakes aren't reputation, but legitimacy. These questions don't just hurt feelings, they hit the constitutional spine of the monarchy. If births tied to the line of succession are obscured, altered, or misrepresented, that's not celebrity drama, that's national consequence. Lady C was blunt: royal privacy ends where succession begins. And she wasn't done. She said the nonstop questions about Archie and Lilibet weren't insults, they were the direct result of behavior that invited doubt. When basic confirmations are refused, when traditions followed since 1689 are discarded without explanation, suspicion becomes inevitable. That's when the conversation took a darker turn, because Lady Colin Campbell didn't stop at paperwork. She went after patterns, visuals, behavior. She pointed to public appearances where Meghan's pregnancy didn't behave like pregnancy, movements that defied anatomy, moments that looked wrong to anyone who's ever carried a child. And she said it wasn't one clip, it was a collection. Then she dropped the claim that made even seasoned observers stiffen. She suggested that what people were watching wasn't just deception, but dysfunction, fueled, in her words, by Prince Harry's own admissions about substance use. Not ancient history, not youthful mistakes, but patterns that could explain erratic judgment, emotional volatility, and a willingness to commit to stories that collapse under scrutiny. This wasn't about shaming, it was about explaining how such reckless narratives could be told publicly without fear of consequence. And suddenly, the Netflix years looked different. The 6-hour docuseries, the unchecked accusations, the absence of receipts, the total lack of balance. Netflix didn't demand proof. They didn't challenge timelines. They didn't ask follow-ups that any serious journalist would ask. Tom Bower's verdict was savage. It wasn't documentary, it was message control. And when viewership collapsed and projects quietly died, insiders say Netflix wanted answers. They had paid for authenticity and got mythology. If the birth stories fall apart, the entire Young Family Under Siege brand disintegrates, which explains why the children suddenly appear whenever criticism peaks. Lady Colin Campbell called it emotional shielding. Roll them out for sympathetic optics, then weaponize privacy when questions return. Pap walks when it helps, silence when it doesn't. She didn't mince words. She said the children are treated less like human beings and more like props, deployed to sell a narrative of devoted motherhood while staff handle the reality off camera. That assessment hardened when Meghan Markle introduced a new storyline years later: life-threatening preeclampsia. Lady C tore it apart. She asked the simplest question: where was this before? Harry himself wrote extensively about both pregnancies and Spare. Every sensation, every detail, yet somehow missed a medical emergency that would have required constant monitoring, extended hospitalization, and a mountain of paperwork. According to Lady Colin Campbell, that omission alone destroys the claim. She consulted specialists, obstetricians, gynecologists, and the verdict was unanimous: the timeline makes no medical sense. No high-risk mother is released hours after delivery. No woman receiving multiple epidurals walks out untouched. No one stops for fast food during a medical emergency. And yet that's exactly the story Meghan told about Lilibet's birth. Lady C called it fantasy, offensive not just to logic, but to women who actually survived preeclampsia. The deeper investigators dug, the worse it got. One doctor listed in Archie's birth story publicly stated he and his wife were out of the country when the child was supposedly born. That isn't rumor, that's documented contradiction. Tom Bower said that's when this stopped being strange and started being dangerous, because all of this could be ended instantly. Release the medical records, name the doctors, open the logs, and they don't, which leaves Buckingham Palace in an impossible position. Officials remain silent not out of loyalty, but fear. One confirmation could ignite a succession crisis. One denial could trigger years of lawsuits over medical privacy. Insiders say even Queen Elizabeth II privately questioned the secrecy, and King Charles III is now said to require hard proof before approving any future official roles or security arrangements tied to the Sussex children. That silence isn't protection, it's containment. Tom Bower says the Sussex playbook is now unmistakable. Accuse loudly, threaten legally, retreat behind friendly media, and never produce evidence. We've seen it before. Bullying claims dismissed as misunderstandings. Book collaborations denied until proven. Letters forgotten, not lied about. Pattern after pattern after pattern. And now the pattern has reached the most sensitive subject imaginable. Tom Bower's final warning was chilling. Every unanswered question doesn't protect the children. children, it endangers their future. Because legitimacy isn't inherited through branding, it's inherited through truth. Lady Colin Campbell's final judgment was merciless. She said Meghan Markle's behavior shows malice, not confusion. That each new medical claim, each revised story, each refusal to verify anything only deepens public doubt. This isn't about pregnancy anymore, it's about credibility. And until proof replaces performance, the suspicion won't die. Because the bombshell wasn't just about births, it was about whether the Sussexes believe truth is optional. And once that question is asked publicly, it never goes away. It never goes away. It never goes away.